the PowerApps project and you just did it wrong. Today, I want to talk about perhaps the steps in creating your apps that you may not be aware of. And if you're not aware of them, chances are you're not doing them. And
Exactly right.
myself and Kurt come from a software development software development background, so we're very aware of these, and we'd sort of like to go over each of these and stress the importance of them. This midweek session that we had with the accelerator students, we sort of delved into each of the steps, talked about why they're important, but I actually want to step through each of the steps with a very simple example so you can see how each of these steps are applied in a very simple example. And then as long as you understand the general concepts between each step, those can be applied to a more larger, more complex project. Right? So here on the screen, I've got three phases that I've identified that I always follow with a software development project. So phase one, you are doing planning and design. Okay. Now, phase two is the actual construction of the application. I'll say application. And that involves more than just what you do in PowerApps. And then the third phase is more of support and disposition. You're disposing of it, you're handing it over perhaps to another team, or maybe it just becomes a project that you just support. Perhaps they might need some minor tweaks whenever that phase is completely done. And usually at that point, that's when you say that the project is done. So anyhow. All right, so let's jump into the first phase here, the different steps of this. And the first phase, I call this defining the application, okay, or application definition.
Typically, Darren, you mind if I jump in real quick here?
Sure.
I just got something I want to add in with all that, because we talk about this. We've been talking about this quite a bit lately, and today's a great deal because we're going to get to show them what we're talking about, why it's important. But I know that in my life, I've always considered some of this a pain in the butt. Some of the stuff that you're doing because it's not fun. You're not out there dragging and dropping and making things happen. But in a past life, I used to play soccer and coach soccer, and it's the same thing in everything in life, right? There's so much fundamental preparation that you have to do if you're going to do things right. You've got to be disciplined to go there and get yourself conditioned and get everything set up right, so that way when it's time to start doing the work, it works out really well. So I guess I just wanted to say that, I know this. You saw 2 out of the 3 things there. Those phases don't have anything to do with PowerApps, really. It's but it has everything to do with PowerApps at the same time. And so, you're not playing you're actually, and it's some of it's boring, some of it's grunt work, but it's all so necessary, man, if you want to do this thing right. So I just kind of wanted to put my stink in on that.
Yeah, I actually appreciate that, Kurt. And that's actually something that we talked on Wednesday night. And you mentioned coaching soccer. I imagine perhaps the practices aren't all that fun for the players. It's more about the games and winning and the experience of the game. And it's like, I've got soccer practice tonight. Got to run around and do my drills. And you can tell me everything that you might do to in a soccer practice. Go ahead.
Just as a note in that, when we started soccer practices up, the first 6 weeks of soccer practice, we never even touched a soccer ball. Never even touched a soccer ball. It was nothing but conditioning and strength.
Okay. I was about to ask, what are you doing if you're not? You didn't even touch a soccer ball. Doesn't sound like soccer.
Yeah, didn't even touch it. Yeah, we were doing all the planning and design is what we were doing. Yeah.
Yeah, at the beginning of an application project, there's probably going to be a lot of meetings and a lot of people talking. And And yeah, it doesn't seem like it's the fun stuff, but there are steps in here. Is if you actually engage in the steps that I'm recommending, it actually does become fun once you make yourself do it. So have you ever started cleaning up your room? "Ah, I got to clean my room up. Maybe it's your office, your bedroom. But about halfway through, you're like, oh, I'm so glad I did this. I see Ron on. I'm going to bring Ron on. Hey, Ron.
There's Ron.
Yeah. So,
And Jeff knows a little bit about the preparation in sports, playing football the way he did. So he knows all about that too. You're not even playing a game; you're out there doing all this work around it. It's the same kind of principle. And
sure. Yeah.
I love the analogy that you just used on your room, because if you ever notice, if you got a messy house or a messy room and you start cleaning, it's a crazy mess, right? It just, you got to make this huge mess before it can actually get cleaned up. So there's so much work to
Yeah.
do to get to that point, right? So yeah,
A lot of times things get worse before they get better in that regard.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
If
they
I'm
do.
gonna, take care of cleaning up my room, something, I might dump a whole laundry basket of laundry on the bed, which makes the room look messier. But sometimes you gotta break stuff open and unpack it and look at it and sift through it. You might have a pile over here for things you want to throw away. You might have a pile over here that needs to be put in the closet or somewhere else in the house. Somebody could walk in the middle of it like, what is going on in here? It actually looks worse.
Yep,
So
yep.
there's some interesting analogies that sort of go along with this.
Yeah. And now, directing this towards Jeff and Ron, because Jeff has got an application that he's working on that he's still in the baby stages of it. He's a little
Mhm.
bit farther along than what Ron is. Ron is his he hasn't even really been born yet. His program yet. So both of these, even at their different stages, this is a really important discussion to have for both of them. I hope you guys can kind of maybe look at this and then try to apply it to the projects that you're working on right now, because it might make a big difference, man. So I just kind of wanted to throw that in there too, since you guys are here.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. So data is king does agree preparation is key. And Elbaz, I'm trying, but it's so much fun just starting and building. That's true, and I'm hoping to
See
hoping to
all the time.
disabuse you of that notion by the end of this live stream. So
I, I
from
I'm the same way though, man. I'm the same way. Darren's always shaking his head at me because he says, "Where's your ERD diagram, Kurt?" I said, "It's right here in my head," and he's like, "Unacceptable,"
well, Kurt, back in the day when I worked with you, you had a whiteboard in your office.
I did.
I did not have an office. I just had a desk out in the middle of the room. And you bring me in, it's like, the whiteboard, and we'd get ourselves some lunch, and we'd sit there and we'd define the ERD diagram on the whiteboard, right? So there,
Right.
in today's
Yeah, you
world
did.
post COVID, we don't typically meet in a physical place and do a whiteboard thing. What were you
Yeah,
saying?
you didn't need an office because we had an office. You would always just come in there and take over my office.
Well, I was also the intern or the new guy for a little
Yeah,
while, you know.
yeah, yeah.
But I started typing in some of these other parts of phase one. Okay, so application definition, gathering requirements. Some people put that together, but I think it's different, and I'll explain why it's different. If you've never heard of user stories, I'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll actually do some here. Okay, so we got user stories. We've got, we need to look at, I'll say here, consider workflows. Okay, that typically maps any business processes that your application needs to either manage or harmonize with. um, so we'll go over that. What about wireframing?
Good
Okay.
morning, Amir.
Yeah, good morning. So, Amber, if you'd like to jump on as a panelist, go ahead and show your video. I'll take that as a hint that you want to come on. Otherwise, you're just welcome to be in the lobby there. So, okay, so we got the wireframing, then we have the database design. Now, I would have to say that there are probably many seasoned software developers that will do these things in a different order. Perhaps you
Sure.
might do your database design first,
Yeah.
you know. But this is the order in which I do it that I think makes logical sense, that will give you the most information for the next step. Okay. So then database design with the wireframing, database design, and then we have, I'll say, define work items. Okay. So we'll talk about that, what that means. Of course, in the application instruction, you're in PowerApps, right? PowerApps Studio, doing the work, but there's a few more things that we would need to do. Okay. So in this phase 2, there's actually, I think I've got one less step in here. So we got PowerApps. That's perhaps where we want to jump in first. But what about actually creating the database? Okay, using the design that we have here. Okay.
Yep.
And then we have creating the database, and that could be also editing as you go along, just like inside of the Power Apps. So you're creating screens. You might go off and create a table and come back. Perhaps all the database design, maybe you've got like a few dozen tables that are related, so maybe you might work on the first part of the application. It all depends upon, make sure I'm not hiding any of the things I have here up on the screen.
Right. Darren, you think, talk about the database design and creating the database. Oftentimes I'll go into a database design, I'll have it. Then I start working on the creation of the database. I'll start thinking, well, you know what, that really needs to be broke out of this table into another table, so you start changing the database design a little bit as you're working. So you almost got, it's almost like, when you go into the phase 1, you're at like level 1 of database design. And then you go in there and start creating your database, and then you go back. So it's kind of like, it's a fluid situation where you're going back and forth in this thing. And
Absolutely.
Right. And yeah. So
sometimes people,
also, I'm sorry, Darren. I got these thoughts going through my head. Also, do you think that database, I wanted to ask you, do you think part of the database design, it might be to create a data dictionary? And do you think maybe talking about data dictionary is something that we should do here? Or maybe that's, maybe we need to do that in another place?
Yeah, I would actually put that into the design or yeah. So I'm just going to put in here database or data dictionary.
Yeah.
Sometimes people do that. Now, I don't like a data dictionary for documenting the database design that you're going to create or that's already been created, because I like to see how the tables are related to each other. And you can see that in a data dictionary. Typically, data dictionary is maybe a Word document or Excel document, and it has all the tables listed off with all the fields and the types. But I like to see how they're all related. So I do see a comment from Menti here. What about choosing the database and type of Power Apps you may want to decide to use? Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be in the planning and design based on the requirements. That is going to affect how you design your database. Okay. Yeah. So for example, if a client has premium licensing, the first thing I'm going to want to reach for is Dataverse. But I'm going to ask a few more key questions that might make SQL Server a better data source. If they don't have the licensing, then you're looking at Dataverse for Teams, or you're looking at SharePoint, or there are some other data sources, but those are typically the two that are used when you don't have the licensing. So that is a good point, Menti. Thanks for bringing that up. So all through this, I should probably mention, especially in this planning design, say documentation. Okay. Each of these steps, you are amassing almost a repository of documents. Okay. So I consider my ERD diagram a part of my project documentation. all the application definition, the requirements, all that type of stuff. I consider, you really want to get that into documented form and not just have these meetings and talk about it. Nobody's actually, there could be somebody taking notes, or perhaps you record the session so you can go back and take notes. But there really needs to be, and if nobody's going to step forward and do it, I'm going to recommend, as you, especially if you want to be a freelancer, a PowerApps freelancer, taking on software projects, uh, you want to step up and actually be in some cases, in some larger projects, you might have a business analyst, project manager. Sometimes people in those roles will do that for you, which is nice. But if nobody's there to fill that role, I encourage you to take ownership of that role until somebody comes in and can do that.
That's right.
So,
Sometimes you have to be in all of those roles. Sometimes when you're a freelancer, you wear many hats
true.
and you're doing all of it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, creating the database. Something that you mentioned, Kurt, that made me think is this is not just a top-down type of thing. You do this, then you do this. Now, initially, yes, but there's a lot of iterative type of a workflow in this project as we go through this. So let's
Yep.
say we're wireframing. Okay, I'm going to say UI/UX is typically what it's called. Back in our day, Kurt, I believe we called this designing our GUI,
A GUI.
graphical user interface, right?
So for these guys that don't know what that is, UI and UX, what is UX? UI is you can tell that is what that is, but UX, what is that?
Yeah. Do you know?
Nope.
Yeah. So it's about the user experience.
Right.
Yeah. So you're
Intuitive.
not only creating the UI, you're like, okay, the button's going here, right? But have you thought through the user experience and how it relates to the business processes? Kurt, you of all people, you taught me on that first job. It's like, hey, Darren, don't put buttons all over the place. You're going to be using the tab key on the keyboard to go from one field to another. Um, and you don't want to force them to move their hand from the keyboard to the mouse. There are people that are really good at doing data entry, and a lot of the screens that you design
That's
um,
right.
in Power
Right.
Apps are just an application development. A lot of it's data
Exactly.
entry. You're providing a way for these people to enter data, so you
And
want to provide that efficient way for them to do that, right?
yep. And people are not beginners. They might be new to your app, but they're not going to be new to your app for very long. And so very quickly they're going to be most of these times these people that have been entering data for this company you're working for, they've been doing it for years. So they've got probably 1,000 different tasks to do in their day. They don't want to spend their time looking at all the little oohs and ahs that you have in your program. So make that an intuitive process.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, So to finish my thought here, there's a lot of things like, let's say, as you're doing your wireframing, you're like, oh, you know what? We completely missed out on some user stories because as we're sort of designing the UI, the people that are involved in the projects, that could be the stakeholders, the users, or the users manager, and you're working through each of these phases, each of these steps in phase one. You're like, oh, well, we need to go back up to gathering the requirements. We completely forgot a whole component that we need to define,
That's right.
And a lot of times what I do, you could sit there and design and design and design. And what I recommend to people, I'm going to put a little note here. Find your MVP, okay? And that is minimal. Hard time with my caps lock here. Minimal viable product, MVP. Okay, so you want to start off with that MVP, unless if the whole application that you want to build is relatively small. Okay, so I'm going to define a minimal viable product here today, which is almost any business needs to keep track of their customers. So an auto detailer comes by, and I think I've told this story several times here on the channel. Um, is that I went out and asked him, hey, how do you keep track of all your customers? Do you use an app to keep track of your business? He goes, no, I just put all of my contacts in my phone. I'm like, oh my goodness, you know. Or during COVID, there were a lot of hairstylists, people who cut hair. They would all the salons would be shut down, so they would go to people's individual homes and cut hair, and that might be something. Or maybe you're mowing grass. You need to keep track of all your customers. Well, now you also might want to keep track of the work that you're doing for your customers. Okay, well, that if we just created an app that kept track of just your customers, would you start using it? Could you start entering data? Well, yeah. Okay, let's start there, because as you start to talk about, well, I need to keep track of all the services I'm going to do. Okay, so these are the possible services, and these are the work, and that now you need to keep track of the appointments and sales and line items and the amount paid and tips involved. And you want to keep track of neighborhoods, because you probably want to spend a whole day in a single neighborhood. You don't want to be going, spending half your day just driving around a metro area, right? So there's all kinds of things. Just even in this basic app that we're talking about, we could sit here and go through all this stuff. And let's say you're a freelancer and somebody comes to you and like, hey, I need an app that, and they get excited when you start asking them questions, and you pull it all out of them. And it's like, hey, we could break this down into phases, because if you design the whole thing in order to give them an estimate, you're like, okay, that's going to be $25,000 and it's going to take 6 months. And they're like, what? I only have $1,000 budgeted. I'm like, okay, well, how about if we just start with the phase one? Maybe we just create a really simple app for, let's say, $500, and it might take you 2 hours to do. Okay. And that's something that they could, start to use. And perhaps as they make money later on, like, okay, now I want to build onto it. I want to add the next step. So even if you start off with this minimal viable product, in this particular case, we're just going to keep track of customers. There. Might be more things, but we could take this minimal viable product of just keeping track of customers, go through all these steps, and then go back up here and say, okay, the next thing we want to do is services, and then go through all these phases again. Now, it's actually good to know about these other things that they eventually want, because you might structure this core piece differently based on knowing about all the other things. So there's a weird balance. Now, rarely, if ever, have I gone in and said, okay, I'm going to build an app for you. It's just going to be one table. But for the purposes of learning, all of this process that I'm going to recommend that you do for all your PowerApps project, I'm just going to focus on a single entity of customers that we're going to keep track of. So I'm keeping an eye on the comments, and people are making some good points, and I'm going to work in some of the things that you guys are adding in the comments into this as we go along. Okay, so moving down here. So typically, what you have different environments when you're developing software, even in PowerApps. Okay, chances are, if you're in an organization and you've been given access to PowerApps, you have access to the default environment. Okay. And you can start developing there. And it's really not the best case scenario, but sometimes you actually share that app in the default environment and people are using it there. What happens if you're entering test data? Then people get upset, like, what's that? What's this? There's 10 John Smiths. We don't have 10 John Smiths in our organization, So it's really a good idea to have different environments with separate data. So as you're entering test data, you can use that test data, and that's not going to be confused with production data. And typically there are at least 2 or 3, sometimes even more, different environments. So as you're developing software and you're ready for, let's say, people to see it, maybe you just want to move it into a demo area. A lot of times I call that test deployment. So they can start testing there, giving me feedback there, and they can work in that area while I'm over here in this development environment. And as I'm creating new things, perhaps I accidentally hit publish in dev or something. They see something like, why did you do it that way? No. That's not going to be pushed out. I was just testing something. I'm doing a little proof of concept to see if something would work. So
Right.
I find it's
So
very good idea to have separate environments. Yeah.
you just, my blood pressure just went up about 1,000% when you're just talking about this right now. I'm just remembering, man, I as a freelancer, because I used to do quite a bit of freelance work, and I would so many times, big businesses now, not just little mom and pop operations, big businesses, they'd task me to do this job, and I'd set up a prototype. And of course, when I do a prototype for a demo, and it was just something for a straw man so that we could go to a meeting and say, oh, this is what I'm looking at. What do you guys think of this? So I show it to them in the meeting. What do you think of this? And then I leave and I come back and they're using it live. And I'm trying to tell them, no, this isn't ready for production, man. This is just, and they would be saying, oh no, it's ready. We're going. We love this thing. I'm like, it's not ready. And oh my goodness, you talk about forest fires.
Or they start using it to get to a screen that you were working on. Like, hey, that button doesn't work. I just spent 2 hours entering all that data and it's
Right.
lost because when I hit save, blah, blah, like,
Right.
So
then they're calling me, they're complaining because their program's not working. I said, this isn't supposed to work yet.
So guys, when your PowerApps project just seems to not go right and you're starting to question if you're even right to work with PowerApps, or like maybe this app stuff isn't for me. No, guys, this is normal stuff that people who create apps, application developers, if you're creating apps, consider yourself a citizen developer. I'm not a coder. You sort of are taking on some of these roles. So I'm like, want to show you all these pitfalls and things that you should be doing. And if you implement them, it's just going to help you out. It's going to make your project smoother. So it's a very real thing. What Kurt and I was just talking about, these experiences with people. Could you consider somebody, let's say the city's paying for sidewalks or curbs to be redone in a neighborhood in a city, and the contractor's doing the construction work, pouring the concrete. They don't do things like all the people there are professionals. They're not going to step in the wet concrete. They know not to do that. But you have to take in consideration, you're not in a vacuum. You're not in this ultra absolute sanitized environment. There might be somebody walking down the sidewalk and just see people, maybe they're on their phone, they're walking their dog and they just walk into the wet cement. There are certain things that are expected that you do in that type of a situation, that you put up cones, that you put up tape, construction, or in the case of police doing an investigation, crime scene, do not cross. You can't just, there has to be like some due diligence put into place, because people either will do things that will mess things up, either intentionally or unintentionally, more than likely unintentionally. And people aren't necessarily trained to know about these different things. So when they ask for a link to your application, you might want to set up a different environment and deploy it there, then send them a link to there. So whenever they're talking about a bug, they're talking about something that they're seeing, something they're experiencing, that it's always happening in that one spot and not the same place that you're trying to do different things. Yeah, this is great stuff. So yeah, test deployment. I also have, I would say here, as you're deploying, let's say out here to this test, and these things could be called something different. I've been in organizations where they'll have QA, and then they have another one called UAT, which is short for user acceptance, or user acceptance. The T, I think, is training. So they're using the app, and you want them to accept what it is that's being built that they're going to start using, right? So that actually could be several, depending upon it seems like larger organizations like to have more process and like to break this down even more. Like they might have 3 to 5 different environments. If this is a small operation, I would recommend at least having 2. Okay.
Hey, just a quick point of order, Darren. Are we?
Mhm.
are we going to be going back and talking about each one of these topics you're putting up on there? Or you're okay?
Absolutely.
Because I'm looking at these things and I've got quite a bit I want to say about some of these things.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. Let's get all of these out. So I sort of want to show them all to you. And let's see, I'm talking about the viewers and the panelists here, and we'll go back through them here. So we got the test deployment, okay, and then we have. I'm trying to get my cursor to go in there. There we go. We got test deployment. We have user feedback, and I'll say user acceptance. You might get most of the user. There's no way in time and space that I'll be using that thing because it doesn't even do what we need it to do, you know. So user feedback, user acceptance, and a lot of times you get that just from them seeing it. Yeah, just from them seeing it. And then I would actually say testing QA would be a separate step. And I mean, you could lump these things in together. Typically, you can get that feedback and user acceptance on what is being built without them actually getting in there, getting into the app, clicking around, entering data. So I have those as two separate steps because they very well could be, and a lot of times are. Okay. And as they're in there testing, poking around, they're going to find bugs. They're going to find things that don't work right. You're going to find things that you thought your UI was very intuitive, or that you're going to have to create some training. I think Kurt and I are probably have a similar opinion. A good app, a really good app, probably won't need too much training. Do you still hold that perspective, Kurt?
Right. It should be very little training. Depending, because some users are going to be new to the entire company, that they're working with. But most of the time, when you're doing like in freelance work or developing stuff, the users already know the workflow, and hopefully you've designed the program to be the same or similar to the workflow. So there's going to be very little training in this, So yeah.
Now, what I would say is, and I think most of the corporate world, the bigger the organization, it becomes more and more real. If this is like a mom and pop shop, you're not going to be sitting there in Word creating a 20-page user manual, So aside from the point,
but like you say though, on a lower scale level, you're still going to be doing all the things. It's just not going to be like what you were talking about, like with the corporation, So yeah.
So I believe that users should have all the documentation that is necessary. However, I believe it's our contention that a good application is designed in such a way that there's not really a lot of required documentation. Things are very similar to apps that they've used before. Um, if the application works with a lot of the other apps that they already use, um, either in the field or there's just some common things that you expect to have when you go to a website. When you use an app, there's a menu somewhere. Typically it's up near the top or the right or the left, and it might look like a hamburger, those three lines. So if you design it the way that almost the whole world is used to, chances are you're not going to need to have a page of documentation describing what the hamburger is and why how to use a menu, those type of things. Okay, so you are not always the person that might be doing this. So like the testing QA, okay, but it is a phase in your project. And I would like to at least give some lip service here to the documentation. Okay, at least put it down here. You may not be doing it. You might be doing some freelancing with a client that says, oh yeah, we need documentation. Perhaps here you have user documentation. Okay, so again, they should have all the documentation that's necessary. Hopefully not a lot will be needed. And then down here, you have, and not all projects need it, but if you're working on a team, there might be, as you're going through this, you're creating documents, okay? But perhaps the project that you're on, there is a requirement that everything is amassed together and it's made very nice and organized. The technical documentation of how you're going to go about it, and what that would do is you'd be putting together all of these things together, and perhaps a software architect might be brought in to review things before you even allow to get into the application construction. So so that's pretty much what I have for the application construction. And then we have the support and disposition. Well, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to deploy. Okay. And that could be, most people think production, but it could be to any of the environments. You could have software that you've built that you need to deploy for a new customer. You might need to install it in their environment. Okay. So, production here is typically what we're referring to, where here in the different environments, I'm going to do a strike through. Does anybody know the keyboard shortcut to do a strike through? Anybody? So I was going to do is strike that out, but I might go back and redo that. I like to share this document that I'm creating with you guys. So typically think of production deployment here. Okay. Then we have got, so really like user success. You've got happy clients, users. Okay. If not, what happens? Well, you get feedback. And then perhaps you might have to go back to this first phase and define a portion, maybe a new component. And in somewhere in here, you might get additional feedback. I'll put feedback that was, so maybe in here, it's maybe like an alpha. If you guys ever heard of, most people have heard of different versions, like a beta version. Okay. So I know Gmail was out there for like a decade in beta form. Is it still out? Are they still claiming beta? I wouldn't be surprised, but there's actually a version of software that comes before beta, and that's alpha. This is like, man, you just got like the hottest release that the developers just did last night, and you probably are going to find bugs, but once it's deployed out into production, you're still going to get feedback. Okay.
Yeah. At some point, I want to do a live stream on what you just said there with the beta and the alpha, because I've played a lot of games with that, and I've done a lot of marketing strategy based on that too. So it'd be I think it'd be an interesting live stream.
We'll have to add it to our list there.
Yeah.
So in deployment, you're still going to get feedback. You get bug reports. And then sometimes you get what's called, it might look like a bug. And I'm just going to put here user errors. Heard that term, Kurt? User error? What's a user error?
That's when they blame you for the problems that they're having at their site. When you release your program out there and that it doesn't, when their Ethernet connector is not hooked up to the computer, and they call you and they make you fly out 800 miles or more to get to their site to fix it, and because your program is not working. And you ask them, you say, did you check your internet connections? Did you check your Ethernet connections? Oh yeah, we did. Okay, well, we're gonna get a ticket. We're gonna fly out there tomorrow. And we go out there and, oh nope, that's all it was. Just hook that up. It works. Yeah.
Oh, the
user error.
The server wasn't turned on,
or the server wasn't turned on.
Plugged in. I hope that you guys can see and recognize that Kurt and I and anybody that's been in software development for a while, and perhaps you've already experiencing this creating PowerApps, is that there's a little bit of like Kurt, you said, you just mentioning that just makes my blood pressure go up, because there's a rite of passage that you need to go through. It's a bumpy ride, the first few projects of and you have all these experiences with people that you've never had before,
Right.
And
Yeah, can I say something more about that, Darren, real
Yeah,
quick
please
here?
do.
Because here's the thing: when you release a program, you get done developing it, you're finished with it, and it's a baby program. I call it a baby program because you've completed it. But there's going to be a lot of bugs in it. And so when you release it and the users are calling you on the phone and they're saying, hey, we got problems, you have to assume it's your program. You have to assume it. You have to make sure that you have to double
Yeah.
check your software to make sure it's right. And then you have to become an expert on the other side of that a little bit, because like for me, I don't like hardware. I detest hardware, but I'm pretty good at hardware because I've had to go through and debug their hardware situation to make sure that it's not my app. I've got to prove to them, because they're assuming that it's your program that's messed up. And it very well could be. But after a certain amount of time of debugging and dealing with customer service, because you're the customer service person too sometimes, your program becomes more mature. And as you're fixing these bugs, and at first you're going to have a lot of bugs. But as you're fixing these bugs, those bugs become more infrequent. And now the user error is on the other side. Now it's more likely that it is their error, right? Because you've already proved it about 1,000 times and you've been down this road before. But you also get good at customer service too. So this is a really important part of that whole process. And it's really important to keep a good attitude and a level of responsibility that says, how much of this is my fault? How much of this is my baby program is still a bug? Make sure you check that first before you go and assume that it's the error from the user, you know? So
Absolutely. Guys, there's so much to be said. We could have a whole session on each of these, to be honest.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
on feedback. There's a
yeah,
human element to this that a lot of people aren't good at, which is taking listening to or intaking constructive criticism, or maybe it's not constructive. It's just the feedback. I don't like that color. That color just gives me a headache. Um, it, it's sort of difficult not to take some of it personally and to get upset about it. Um, and what I like about, I've noticed this out of Microsoft employees. When I go to Microsoft conferences, sometimes you'll hear like, you guys have done blah 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 and whatever, and I never see like this negative response, and it's almost as if maybe they got some training that all all feedback is good feedback, you know,
that's right. That's right.
and
It is.
yeah, and it's so hard. You almost should assume positive intent until it's proven otherwise. If somebody's just there to bash you and your work, and they're just negative and the whole time, maybe it's you might want to take a step back and say, okay, this isn't constructive. Maybe we should go back to the agenda or whatever, or follow that up with management or something. Maybe if there's a recurring theme of something that maybe just somebody just focusing on something negatively and not really offering any positive possible solutions. So if somebody tells me I don't like that, well, hey, do you have a style guide from your marketing department? Typically I would ask that for up front. But if they don't like a certain color and they haven't provided any color palettes or any branding for their company, I'll say, okay, well, what I'd love to put whatever color you like in there. I try to
Yeah.
keep a nice contrast between the colors for people with vision disabilities. But
But sometimes, Darren, even if a person has malintent in their feedback, if the level of it's true, it's still important, right? Even if it's maybe
yeah,
it's intended to just to hurt you, but guess what? If there's just 1% of that being true, maybe it's something we need to take a look at, right? And so I try to keep an attitude like that too, and yeah,
that's a good point. I think that is good advice, and I think it's also I think a lot of times it's difficult because your
and
emotion is good.
nobody likes criticism. I don't. I hate criticism unless it's good criticism, right? But I mean, if somebody tells me I'm
If
doing
that's a
something wrong,
compliment,
or yeah, right, yeah.
or
So I hate criticism, but it's so important, and my best growth both as a programmer and as a human being has been from people's criticism of me. It,
yeah,
you don't learn from everything that you're doing right. You learn from what you did wrong. right? Because if you're doing it right, you're not learning. You've already learned it.
All feedback, whether it's coming in negative or positive, is a learning opportunity.
It is. And guess what? If you're doing something wrong, that learning opportunity is and you choose not to, you can choose, it's up to you to choose to learn it, right?
Right.
But if you choose not to learn it in that moment, that learning opportunity is going to come again and again and again and again and again at you until you get it right.
Right. Or sometimes you might think you have a problem fixed, but then it'll come from a different angle. Maybe
that's right. That's a good point right there too. And,
right.
and when software development, that's so important because especially if you're building things like Darren does. You guys have been watching his YouTube channel for a while, right? So he doesn't build simple little apps. He starts off that way, but then by the time he gets done after the first session, it's this huge system that's got all these apps built into it, right? So when you do that, you've got all these different potential issues that you've got to come in at the moment. That's especially in PowerApps, because PowerApps, I think, my own personal opinion, it wasn't designed for system development. It was more designed to be an app. It's PowerApps. We're going to build this one app to do this one thing, right? But Darren and me, we're systems developers. It's hard for us to design an app to do one little thing. We're going to make that app do this and this and this and this and this. And then we got this huge system going. So there's a lot of potential places for that. And you might have that problem solved in this one direction. But if you come at it from this direction, oh boy, you got another problem here. You got a whole other set of variables that you got to deal with. So that's a good point you said there, Jeff. Okay. What do you think about that, Darren? You building systems.
Yeah. Actually, a big thought that I had here was even the most simplest apps, they end up sprawling.
Especially if you're Kurt and Darren, that's more true than for some other people probably. But that's just because we love what we're doing and we try to find more uses for the same thing that we're dealing with,
And we aim to please. We aim to under promise, over deliver, and give them, even more stuff than they may not realize. So in my mind, it's always, I always try to look for that MVP, that minimal viable product that we can start to use, because they can start entering data, start giving you feedback, and that feedback on that first screen might apply to the next 15 screens you're about to do. Now, if you can imagine, if you were doing this whole thing, you design it, they're like, yeah, that looks good, go ahead and build it. And you create all these screens, and then you're like, okay, here it is. And like, oh, they give you feedback, it applies to everything. Now you got to change it everywhere. So it's really important. You might think, oh, we'll start with the minimal. We're going to start with this little small thing. No, we need to get this huge thing done.
Right.
I believe that breaking it down is actually fastest overall. It's most efficient overall, even if it takes it's a whole year project.
That's right. I want to go over to the comments. I'm sorry, Darren. I thought you were done. Were you done, Darren?
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
Okay. Mente over here and the comments, he just threw something up there that I think we should address real quick. Access and sharing the app in production. Who should have access to the app? And that's a really good question, man, because I believe this is what Kurt believes. And remember this, Darren. Remember when you were taking the classes? I used to use this. You've got to assume that you have a room full of stupid monkeys. 1,000 stupid monkeys that are working on your keyboard. They're just jumping up and down on your keyboard. Just go bam, 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 bam. They're using this. They're going to break your program. They're going to try to break your program because, as a programmer, we're sitting here going with the pattern of the keys, making sure that we hit everything just right. But you get some monkeys in there and they just start jumping on that thing and they don't know what they're hitting. You got to kind of assume that, right? So when you're in these apps, this testing environment, there should be a cross section of people that you've got to deal with. People that, and I don't want to call them the stupid monkeys, but I'm just saying that, assume animals that don't know, how to hit keyboards. That's what I'm talking about. So have some people in there that don't know anything about computers. If you can have somebody in there that's not very computer illiterate, if you can, or somebody who doesn't generally mess with the computers. These days, it's kind of hard to find somebody that's computer illiterate. But have somebody it's not their job, go in there and kind of mess around with that program and see if they can break it. and then have somebody that's got the adult in the room that can think pretty good around this, saying, hey, you know what, this color scheme isn't quite right. So have a good cross section in there of people in your test environment, man. And Darren, I love what Darren said. He probably invented the saying, but I made it profound when I said it. So I'm just going to put it out there like that. But I love what he said when he says that I'm probably the person who should not be testing the program. You're the last person that should be testing the program, the programmer, the person who wrote the program, because you're doing everything the way it was intended, and it's hard for you to think outside of that box. That's when you need the room full of stupid monkeys to come in here and just start jumping on your keyboard, because that's when
I'm getting nervous. I understand your analogy. I'm getting nervous with referring to people.
Okay,
as
probably shouldn't
I don't want to do that. So I know you don't mean anything by it. I just don't want anybody's feelings to be hurt or anybody offended or anything. So
that's true. That's true. Yeah. But sorry if I offended anybody. That wasn't my intention.
Yeah, but your point is valid. You want people from different backgrounds, different skill levels, and you also need to assume or presume that people are not going to use it the way that you think that they will. There's a lot of memes on this that are hilarious. There's this little video I saw where this talking about putting like these blocks, these shapes that maybe a toddler would use to learn how to put things away or whatever, but they put them in these little slots, and there's a square one, a round one, like a star shaped one, and there's this developer sitting there, and the voice says, okay, this looks like it would go into this hole, and I think it was, okay, let's say a square, this square thing is going to go in the square hole. She's like, yeah. And then the round one goes in the square hole. And she's like, no, the round one. And then there's this star one. And the star one goes in the square hole. And she's like, no. And you'll be surprised how people use your application. You think I'm creating a comments or notes field, and perhaps you're thinking it'd just be 2 or 3 lines, like just a little comment or something. There will be people that will try to paste in a 10-page Word document in that thing. Right? In fact, if you have a QA department, you have testers, that's exactly the type of stuff that they'll do. They'll do all that. In fact, a lot of times they'll have automation tools that will do all kinds of random things. So, yeah. So think about, so that is the part that I really like. And I think that's what you meant, Kurt, about monkeys banging on a keyboard is right. You should assume just like weird random things,
I'm actually saying we should put some monkeys in there and see them jumping on your keyboard and see if it breaks or not. That's what I'm thinking. Or maybe a cat, put a cat out there and let them walk around on the keyboard.
Yeah.
I've had that happen. I used to, back in the old days, the very old days, I used to operate a bulletin board system. I wrote a bulletin board system software. And I ran the BBS with it, and I would have my computer set up.
You do that? What?
This was like in the early 80s. And so you would have a computer set up all night, just on a dedicated phone line to receive phone calls from other computers. And they would leave messages on these BBSs, and then they would hang up, and then somebody else would come in and do the same thing. So anyway, I've got this thing running 24/7 on a dedicated phone line, and I would go to sleep. And my cat would get out there and be walking around on the keyboard, and somebody say, "Man, I'm trying to type a message on this thing," and somebody keeps on pressing the keys. It was my cat. So this literally happened. So yeah.
Okay, so I've got a few comments I want to respond to, but I want to get to Minty's thing here. Access and SharePoint app in production. Who should have access to the app? Well, typically they'll tell you, hey, you wrote the app for me, I need to use it, or my team needs to use it, that type of thing. I would only give access to the people that actually need it in production. And the same thing would be said for each of the environment. Like if somebody's not going to help test, then I wouldn't put them in test. If somebody's not gonna use it in production, I wouldn't add them there. So a lot of times, cybersecurity is really important. DBAs are really on top of this. They only want to give you're talking about the minimal viable product, the minimal amount of access that somebody absolutely needs to do something. You know, so moving on, data is king made a great point. People that are testing will have a fresh set of eyes that you as the developer can't see. It's absolutely true. All right. So, Ellie, how to keep your clients from going rogue and changing the backend SharePoint list? Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Well, what I do, this could be a whole topic of how to lock down your SharePoint list and how to hide them and but what I do is I create a whole if I'm going to use SharePoint as a data source, what I do is I create a whole new fresh new SharePoint site that will be a data repository and a data source for this new app that I'm creating. And I don't tell anybody about it, you know, but I make people members and I don't email them. I don't check off the little checkbox. Hey, email these people that they've been added to this SharePoint site. Now they could find it, okay, but I don't necessarily let them know about it. Now there might be cases where there's already a huge SharePoint site and it's got a bunch of lists that you need to tie into, and maybe you just don't have that luxury. Maybe the IT department isn't gonna allow you to have a whole new SharePoint site that you're an owner of, and it makes it a little difficult there. But I would take away their permissions to changing the SharePoint list fields, like the schema, changing the field names, because that would definitely break your application. But there's another level to this, which is what do you do with people that are trying to go in and modify the data directly and not go through your application? Because you might have business rules and business logic inside your application that should be followed before the data is changed in SharePoint. So that is a little bit of a drawback to using SharePoint as a data source. There are a lot of workarounds, things that you can do that really help you out. I'm not going to go into to all that. I think that would actually be a great whole session that would be dedicated to that.
Would be.
So Ellie continues, or adding 9 additional people, picker fields that breaks your app. Yeah, you definitely don't want that to happen. And then Chris, some testers will max out your attachment control and call that a problem, even though in real life, there will never be that many attachments. That's true. I've had testers do things. They love to come in and they won't even call them bugs. They say, I found a defect. And I think that word makes my blood pressure go up, Kurt.
Yeah, whenever they come at me with that, I come right back with them saying, no, that's a feature. That's a feature, bud.
An undocumented one, and then they might get you on the documentation, right?
That's a defect. No, it's a feature, man.
Oh yeah, but yeah, I say defect, and every time I hear the word defect, and I'm in let's say a stand up or something. If you guys never heard of stand ups, it's the way the software industry, maybe once a day or several times a week, at least once a week, all these things called stand ups, which means everybody's supposed to get up and stand up out in the hallway and have a really short 5, maybe 15 minutes at the most. Everybody's standing up. So nobody sits down at a conference table and talks and it goes on for an hour, right? It's stand up. You're supposed to be as part of the agile methodology where you stand up and go, hey, what are you working on? What have you accomplished? And then it just goes around the room. Everybody talks about it, you know? When the testers are part of that, like I found a defect, it sort of, has an effect on you sometimes. The word defect, I don't know, it does me. What are you saying, Kurt?
I really hope here's another live stream I want to do is on that agile methodology. I just love the concepts of it. It's still kind of new to me because, I come from the old school. And that's why I made those kind of comments, like the stupid monkey comments and things like that. Cause I come from the old school. These days it's maybe not quite the thing to be saying anymore, but also, this new agile, to me, it's new, and you bring it up and you bring up the points, and I've kind of been learning the agile methodology as I come along here. But I really love the concepts. I love the idea of the stand-ups. I love the idea of the storyboards. I just think that's all really cool stuff, and I think that we could really we should do a live stream on that. I think.
Yeah.
You know.
So I want to capture all these ideas for the videos. So locking down SharePoint lists. So if you guys have any other ideas that's related,
we did enough. I said something earlier about one I'd like to do too, but I can't remember what it was now. Do you guys remember what that was, Jeff, Ron?
Not off the top of my head, but I know we also talked about just how many people would be for testing, different testing methods and things like that. I think we talked about doing some of that for a video idea.
Yeah. Okay. Testing.
Setting up test environments, Data King just said.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Shooting. Normally I'm able to spell, but if somebody's watching me type, I can't spell. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
Well, you're living proof that you don't have to know how to spell to be a computer programmer.
Right.
I used to say that all the time on the whiteboard. I'd be up there, and it's really funny because these days you want that. Somebody told me that if you got a YouTube channel or something like that, and you want to keep people's retention, misspell something, because people love to point out the fact that you misspelled something, and then you can say, "Well, thank you for watching," right? So, but I used to do that all the time. I'd be up on the whiteboard and somebody would be like Darren or somebody say, "Well, Kurt, you misspelled this." No, Darren never did that. He never did that. He was never petty like that. But some of these students would just be like, "Oh, you misspelled while." I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm living proof that you don't have to know how to spell to be a computer programmer. You just don't,
Going back to setting up that testing environment, a couple of years ago, I researched some weld documentation software, and at that time I didn't know that I was learning something, but it applies to this conversation. But when they allowed me to do a demo, it had a specific time frame on it. Like one company did 3-day demo, another one did a 7-day demo, and they would ask me, "When are you going to have time to get in there and play around with it? Because we don't want to start the demo until you're ready to have time to do the demo," because it was limited, but that was also a good way to keep me from starting to try to use it. And like you were talking about earlier, where companies would take a demo and try to go live with it and be using it before you were even done building it.
Yeah. People get excited about their apps that you're writing for them. And a lot of times when you get to the application definition, when I get an email or somebody stops me in the hallway, somebody fills out a form, a request for work, it's, "Hey, I need an app that keeps track of my customers. How much is that going to cost? How long is it going to take it?" Or if you're a PowerApps employee, you have a PowerApps position, and it's like, "Okay, so this is what needs to happen. How long is that going to take you? Is this like a month, or 2 weeks?" If somebody pressures me on anything, my standard response is 2 weeks, which is sort of a comedy callback to an old movie called, anybody know? Anyone?
Office Space.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
What?
I was thinking of Money Pit. It
might have been Money Pit. It might have been Money Pit. I saw that.
Tom Hanks and
yeah.
I
Shelley Long.
It's an older movie.
That's a great comeback though. 2 weeks.
Just 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and people get used to me and I'm like, "Oh, just 2 weeks," and sometimes I laugh and then sometimes they don't. Okay, damn, really, So, Kurt, would you say at what point in all of this can you give somebody a time and a cost estimate? Looking at all these phases here, I'm gonna zoom
within this planning and design. So much of that's 3 steps forward. You can give them an estimate, but it might not be right. That's why you call it an estimate, right?
Well, almost always they'll say, "Oh, I'm not going to hold you to it, just ballpark." But
Yeah.
you give them a
But then they do.
ballpark and
But
say,
then they
"Hey,
do
it's
hold you
subject to change based on you giving me more information or something." Oh, it always changes. There's no project I've been where it just never changes.
But the one
Then
thing
they'll be
that
like,
doesn't change, sorry, Darren, the one thing that doesn't change is when you say, I'm going to give you this estimate, but it's just an estimate. And they say, yeah. We're not going to hold you to it. Just give me the ballpark. Give me a ballpark. But I guarantee you they're going to hold you to that later down the road when things do change and you're adding stuff to this program and it's taking you more time to do it. But you said it was only going to cost $40,000. Well, that was before you had all this. But no, you're right, Darren.
yeah, the time and the cost are very connected. And then sometimes I tell people you got three things, almost like a triangle, three things. You've got the cost, the speed that it will take, which are the two things they want to know. They never mention the quality. For me, it's almost a non-negotiable. I'm going to give you quality work. I only do quality work, so I'm going to do it in a certain way. And let's say out on Fiverr, people ask me, pricing, and I'm like, I give them price. Whoa, like, hey, I'm probably the most expensive guy out here, but I believe the quality of work that I do out there reflects that. You could find somebody that, I'll get it done in a week, $15, but what are you gonna get?
Right.
You just everybody, the customers typically assume that it's gonna be high quality. Otherwise, they'll just keep asking for revisions. But sometimes when you go for revisions, and about the third time, you realize these people are never going to understand. They're not seasoned enough to know what they're talking about.
Right. So I would always go through the levels of planning that you have your phase one. By the time I got out of phase one, I could probably give them a really good definition. But really, it's by the time I get done with the considering the workflow stage of this thing, I've got down how much it's going to cost. And I got to a point where I would just pad it by 20%. Whatever I think it's going to be, I'll do that without thinking about it. And I'll just pad it by 20%, because I guarantee you it's going to go up 20% easy. And I'm still coming out short, probably. Christopher, he's got a comment up here I wanted to address real quick. You have to ask for where the existing data exists at the beginning. There's sometimes people want to start on the user interface first. I believe in the data first. And the first question, and I think I've told you this many times, Darren, the first question of when somebody says, hey, can you write a program for me? The first question is where's the data? Where's the data? That's the number one question, man. If you're not asking that question from the beginning, you're already going down the wrong track. Where's the data? And then what kind of data are we dealing with? Where's it at and what kind of data are we dealing with?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. And I would, and as you were saying that, Kurt, I added that in here. Typically, when I say application definition, that is the initial meeting, the initial email. Hey, I need an app that does this. Yep. Hopefully, they're saying, we've got this old CRM system that we need to transition from, and so hopefully you'll get that there. But somewhere along the lines, you're going to start to pick up things. Well, this needs to come in from blah. Whoa, okay, we need to talk about that more. Might have to go back up. And what the answer to the question that I posed to you guys, when can you give a cost and time estimate? You got to design the thing first, really, if they want a solid estimate. And I don't like to give ballparks because the ballpark really could be a different ballpark by the time they're done giving me all the information. Once you get them, have you ever had somebody brainstorm? They think, oh, this is just a simple application. And just like more and more comes out. And one little thing that you think that they may not think would be even warrant even mentioning, hey, this application is for a Canada user base. And for me, that might, if you don't have any experience, you may not know, hey, they speak French up there too, and in some areas they all speak French. I believe. I could be corrected on this, guys. And I think other areas, English is the primary, and then maybe other locations, people are speaking both, and for someone to say, oh yeah, I told you this was going to be used by Canadians. Okay, I'm fine with it being used by Canadians. What do you mean? Well, I mean, how does this interface switch over to French? Oh, well, you didn't say that. I told you it's for Canadians, man. Like, that's
Right.
like, you got to
That's a
listen really
good.
carefully.
That's a really good way you put that, Darren, because that's the kind of way it comes into almost insidiously, where you just, you're coming at this thing as innocent as possible, trying to do this thing right, and then somebody comes in here and they'll throw a little side thing in there, and they're innocent within it too, but it's just the way they put it. It comes at you almost like, well, I didn't see it coming from that angle. I didn't, I told you it was so. That's a good point, man. There's a couple things I just kind of wanted to address. Were you done with that, Darren?
Well, what I want to throw in, it almost makes it sound like these people are doing awful things to you as a developer, as a creator, an app creator, right? But I don't think it's intentional. I think a lot of it's human nature, and they don't understand the process that you're going through or your field. Okay. So this is something to keep in mind, because there's a lot of things that are going to make you upset being a software developer. I've talked about somebody using the word defect. I'm like, hey, hold on a second. Let me go verify that it's actually a defect. That could be, as Kurt says, that's actually a feature. That's not a defect.
Right.
But so you had something that you were going to add on to that, Kurt?
Well, I kind of wanted to address Ellie Carter's comment up here. She had a question. I'm sorry. How long do you allow for support after app is completed, or do you always remain in phase 3 support and disposition? And I wanted to say back earlier in this conversation, I was talking about how you have a baby program and then it becomes a mature program. There's a time, usually it's about a year once you release it. This is kind of as what I've learned through the years of working on different kind of operations. About a year after you release it, and you've gone through the debugging process, and it's a mature program, there becomes, we call it a technology transfer, and a term called technology transfer. And what you're doing is you're saying, okay, I am giving you all of this. This is you, and this is not me anymore. And and you can walk away. Now, anything else happens from that, it's going to cost money. It's going to cost money. Then the other thing I wanted to say, Dan, real quick, back to the other topic where we just left. I've actually made it a practice now to where if somebody's asking me, unless it's something really simple, and I know I can do it, I've done it 1,000 times. It's not going to take much time at all. And if it's something that I've got to really look into, like say for you and I, like Kurt and Darren are going to go in here and go look at this thing. I'm going to say, look, it's going to cost you $1,000, maybe $2,000, depending on how big this thing is. It's going to cost $1,000 to $2,000 for us to do a request for quote. We're going to do it. You have a request for quote. We're going to research this thing and create a quote for you. And it's going to cost you $1,000 to $2,000 to give you an estimate, a good cost estimate of what it's going to take to do this. Now you can take that $2,000, and after you pay it, you can take that. We're going to give you the documentation of all this, and you don't have to use me, or you don't have to use me and Darren, but you're going to pay for this up front, because it gets extensive, man. It takes a lot of time if you're going to do this right. Think about this phase 1. Think of the time that you've got to put into this, man. And you don't even know how to, you can't even spell quote for somebody asking you how much money is it going to cost to do this program. Yeah. So you need to charge that. You need to say, look, it's going to cost this much money for me to do this. It's going to cost you $1,000 for me to do this. And that now they're invested in you. Now they're serious about this thing, Yeah. And I don't know that, I guess. And then they don't have to use you. They could take that paperwork and go find somebody else now, But
yeah, it's sort of like a deal that you make with them, because as they start to talk about their app, when freelance stuff comes in, I'm like, oh, this is going to take me the whole afternoon to sort of think through their process, and typically they haven't given me all the information. I got to like sort of pull it out from them, and it's not documented anywhere. They just like to do diary of the mouth just in a single session, and you got to like really think through that, and it might take multiple days. You can't do that stuff for free. I mean,
nope.
Unless you're like really confident that you're definitely going to get the job, and you can sort of build that into the price. Some people do that, but a deal that I try to make with people is like, I think it's going to take 10 hours of work. Some of those are meetings, some of that's design time on my end, and creating some diagrams and doing these steps.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll try to pitch them an idea just based on the size, because the size of the application could be so huge. It could take you months to design something. I mean, really large enterprises, and you got teams of developers. Here
Yeah.
typically with Power Apps, you're just talking about one Power App on a single project. But just like building construction, you could be talking about something tiny. You could be building sheds all day. And then it's typically different type of an operation. If they say, okay, what you just want a shed here? No, I want a skyscraper. Well, that's still building, but that's completely different type of expertise and engineering and all that type of stuff.
And most viable companies are going to, when they got a big project, they're gonna ask. They're not gonna say, hey, how much is it going to cost to do this? They're going to say, hey, can you do a request for quote? I've got a request for quote here. Can you go out there and find that for me? They're already knowing up front that we're going to pay you to go out and find out how much this is going to cost. If they're doing good cost studies and things like that, you've got to do that. You've got to do that.
Absolutely. So I left this comment on the screen because I had a thought here. And I definitely liked and agreed with your answer to this, Kurt. But what I would add to that is that it can really vary based on the not only the size of the project, but also the size of the organization. Okay.
That's right.
So if it's a large organization, they have a sizable IT department, or at least they have a department in general. And they typically will want their IT department to support it. Maybe they've got a team of people that will take that on. And typically the IT department, let's say if a separate department like finance or something, they go off and find you as a freelancer, the IT department is going to be very happy that they weren't utilized to do that solution. But IT departments are so much in the business of telling people no and not yet, or you can't have it. I'm not going to let you touch it. That companies go off and find contractors to do stuff. And then the IT department, well, I don't know if we're going to allow that on our network. So you've got all that drama. But as long as you don't have that drama, what you're dealing with is probably a quick handoff, and they're going to want documentation and everything. But let's say they don't have an IT department. They might want you to support it for that year, and if they're not asking for any changes, any additions, and they don't come across any bugs anymore, perhaps that year is a sweet spot. If it's a really small application, it might be more like 3 months or 6 months, but a year is a good type of thing that you might actually want to build into your cost estimates. Hey,
right now, it's interesting you bring up these IT departments, and when I've dealt with that in the past, of course, oftentimes the IT departments are rather small too, from what I've dealt with, maybe 2-3 people. But what I would do in a case like that is, instead of handing it off to them, I would rent it out. I'd rent my program out. I remember I had a program that we rented out. It was $3,000 a year for a license, and we give you guaranteed 24-hour support and this could be 10 years down the road, but you're paying $3,000 a year for this program,
and most companies seem to be going that way, right?
Right. Now this was the days. This was in the 90s. So now that would be what? It'd be about $12,000, right? It'd probably be about $12,000 a year.
Kurt, I remember. I don't even know if you remember you telling me this. Is you watch it, Darren? Eventually, all these apps that we use from Microsoft, Word and Excel, they'll be like web based, and they'll want us to pay per month for it. It's exactly what we do now. At least I do. Look what happened. Everything is being provided software as a service, or SaaS. Right. Yeah. Which I believe is also a product as well. Software as a service. And so instead of having these releases once a year, once every 2 years, and then installing the new version and migrating data, no, it's just service. It's almost like a cloud service. Just come to this URL, or we got a URL that sits on somebody else's server, and the data is managed over there. A lot of people don't like that sometimes.
And that's another thing. I really don't know SQL Server very well, and I need to learn that very well. I really think that you guys out there, you people out there that know SQL Server and PowerApps, you guys should be against the law because there's so much power in that. Could you imagine knowing SQL Server and being able to have your own tenant out there and create your own server out there, and then you can just start writing programs and just renting it to people. You could just rent it to people. I just think that would be so awesome to be able to do that, and I want to do that. In fact, that's one of my goals here. That's my bucket on my bucket list.
I'm going through the comments here. These are great points people are bringing up, Chris. Initially, the client claims they want to keep the old data for archiving purposes, but after they see the app, now they want the old data in the app. Things change their mind, and that's what's so important about documentation, that you provide documentation of what they're getting. So I have technical documentation here, but let's say we've got, this is pretty much how you're going to go about it. But what about, it's almost called the requirements documentation. And as you go through it, it just becomes a part of that. But you have the general. So this isn't user documentation of how to use the app. This is what the client or customer is getting. And then you send that to them, and they're like, whoa, on this page you say that's not right, or you forgot something else, or I forgot to tell you about something. So to go back to that point, at what point can you give a cost and time estimate? After telling them what they're getting, they've told you what they need and want, and you've organized it, and you're putting in a document like, this is what you want, right? And then you get them to sign off on it. Like, hey, this is so, and you don't want to tell people they can't have any changes or change their mind, but you need to have an agreement in place. Say, hey, this is what you told me that you wanted, and you're signing here that you agree that I understand what it is that you want, but you also understand and agree that if you change things, then that will be in addition to this.
You just brought up a great point here, man, Darren. You can be a hard case on this and say, nope, you signed off on this and this is where it's at. But you really want people, there's so much to this, right? Because you're a business and you want people to come back to you. So you want them to be happy, and plus
business is about relationships.
It is. And I want to be, I enjoy what I'm doing. So if you really enjoy what you're doing, you don't mind doing the changes, as long as you can still eat, I mean, it's not, you got to make sure you're paying the bills, right? But there's a balance in there. And hopefully maybe that's something that we can explain to people up front when we're doing this cost analysis and we're talking to Snuffy Smith, the store owner, or whoever it is that we're dealing with. And we can say, hey, this is the problem that I run into in my life oftentimes is I set these things up and then the project gets bigger and then it's so I do want to make changes for you, but we've got to come up with an agreement that if you're going to do something big, we're going to have to add to this. Is that okay, Snuffy? Can we do that? And maybe you guys can work out an agreement within that from the beginning of that, saying that maybe that needs to be up front, a discussion about how this is going to grow. Maybe we need to teach Snuffy that this is the way software development works. So that way he knows when he's paying $40,000 for this program initially, now it's going to cost $50,000 because he wanted these changes, right? So, yeah, so much to that, man.
Minty was probably asked this even before we got on it. Do you like your client to sign off on the requirements before you start the application? Absolutely. Especially the bigger the application, more so. If it's a really tiny application, like something that I'm hoping to get around to doing today, that some of these things aren't as important. The larger the application gets, the larger the organization, sometimes the more things that you have to do, the more concerned you need to be about the contracts and all this stuff. And they'll make you sign contracts and make you promise to a lot of things because they're used to dealing with contractors and building big systems. So just be aware that might come up. So looking through the comments. So Ellie says, I do this on the side of my desk, no budget. I do my daily work and salary, create apps for partnering areas. Very good. Yeah, so this is a great point. MD. Migrating old data is no small job. Don't think that that is going to be, it seems like it might be easy. I'm just going to import a CSV, a comma separated value file.
That's a big job.
Don't underestimate that. It's really easy to underestimate importing old data. Yeah. So, okay, very good.
Darren, like you're keeping a list of these things that you go through when you're planning and setting up with your customer how you're going to carry out the task of building their app. But it seems to me that it would be a pretty good idea to just keep a list also of, hey, these are things customers often want to add on later, like in embedding old data or archive data, something like that. And so, maybe that way you could have a proactive upfront conversation with, we could maybe get there if these kind of things are what you want to add on later, but there's going to be additional costs involved,
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's great that you just mentioned that, because in my advice to find an MVP. So let's talk about this project, a simple CRM. Let's say we're doing a lawn mowing business. Okay. That can be applied. That same app could be used by hairdressers, could be used by auto detailers and all kinds of different stuff. Handymen.
Right.
I mean, think about this, guys. So if you do this, build this, I mean, you can end up selling this app. Okay. Just throwing that out there. Okay. A simple CRM system is pretty much the type of system that we're looking at building. Okay. Now, a lot of times your clients aren't going to come to you and say, I need a CRM. They may not know what a CRM is, that's actually a type of a system. They might say something, I need an app that keeps track of my customers. And that might be all that you get. Isn't that crazy? And you'll find, some people are more detailed oriented than others. So you'll get a wide range of things. Sometimes people give you screenshots, documentation. Sometimes you'll have a well thought out few paragraphs, and then as you talk to them, you might find out. Well, what I start to ask is the who, what, when, pretty much all the questions that you became familiar with in high school journalism class: who, when, who, what, when, where, why,
and how. Don't forget how.
You could say how, and the how almost comes into, you could say the how, you almost get into considering workflows and stuff, and it's fine getting this information up front. So you can throw in a few others, and these questions aren't very intuitive, but I have a whole video in the accelerator program where I step through what I mean by all these things and what you need to look at on each of these questions, like the why. Why? Don't ask me why. I just want the app written. No. Like, if you tell me why, I could probably tell you, well, there's already an app that does all that. You could just buy it. It's a lot cheaper, So if you only want to use only keep track of your customers, there's a simple thing that will keep track of that for you. It's like, oh, well, later on, I want you to implement this feature and this feature. I want it to do this and that. And then, so you get into the why, it really changes some things. So you almost need to let your clients know, listen, hey, I'm going to ask you a question, and it might sound rude for me to ask this, but it's really important to the whole process. Why? Why do you need this? Why are you going about it that way? And the best consultants that charge the most money know the right questions to ask. And a lot of times comes down to the why. And based on that why, you might say, you don't need me to write an app. You just might need a spreadsheet. Now that's sort of weird hearing coming out of my mouth, because I want to move people from spreadsheets, keeping data in spreadsheets, using those as database over in apps. But there might be a really simple solution to the problem that they have there,
Darren, you keep bringing up this accelerator program. Maybe one of these days we need to do a live stream on the accelerator program, this accelerator program of yours,
Yeah, absolutely.
You keep bringing that up.
So I don't believe I have a link to it. Actually, if you look at the very top of the screen, the tiny URL, the Power Platform community, there's some links in there, some samples, and there's some more information to that. Essentially, if you guys want to talk to us about the accelerator system, pretty much where we commit to you for 12 months and we work with you on your projects. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. But if you want to learn more and find out if you're a good fit, and we actually invite people to that, we talk to you, find out where you're at, where you want to go, what your goals are, and then based on that, we'll actually invite you to the program if we feel that you're a good fit. So there's links there on the community site if you want to know more about that. So you'll find that I bring on panelists, and not all the accelerator students want to be brought on as panelists. Like on a live stream like this, we have group calls during the week where we go through different situations. Maybe people are stuck on certain situations. I ask people to share their screens, and we start to dig through some of the issues that they're having, and we provide feedback to each other. And it's really a beautiful thing. So if you want to know more about that, follow the links and book a call with me and Kurt, and we'll talk to you. And a lot of times we offer some free advice on perhaps something that they're working on, even if maybe they feel like it's not a good fit, or we don't feel like it's a good fit, but maybe there's it's almost like a little consultation. So there's value being provided there as well.
Yeah. Some of these guys that I see making comments over here, I suspect they would be pretty good fits in there. Some of them. I'd like to talk to some of these guys.
I think I saw Ellie above said, "I found my tribe." Yeah. So if you guys are still here listening, you are my tribe. You
are the tribe.
I'm all about, and in fact, Data's King touches on it here. The more questions that you ask in the beginning, the less headaches. That is what all this stuff is about, is avoiding, sidestepping, minimizing drama, headaches, backaches. What else do you want to throw in there?
Dissatisfied customers.
Yeah, a loss of time and money. There's something that could be really disheartening for a project. It gets canceled. It gets you get kicked off the project. Then they have to bring somebody else on, or the app just doesn't get used at all, because it's typically people that let me bring up this outline here. People that jump in to PowerApps Studio without doing this stuff, they end up with this disaster on their hands. And that's typically a lot of times people come to me with contracting work. It's because they've gone in and tried to do it themselves, and they didn't do these steps right. And then end up doing some of these steps with them. It's like, okay, it almost sounds like you want to do this yourself. Do you want me to give you fish, or you want me to teach you how to fish, how to do this yourself, so you don't get into these binds? And one of the phrases that I love, it's a Kurtism. Don't code yourself into a corner, is what he would tell me. Same thing can be said for PowerApps. You start to, you don't know proper database design. You might end up throwing all your data into one table, like people are used to, throwing everything into a single spreadsheet. And so you're designing yourself into a corner because you didn't do that upfront work. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Ellie, we'd love to talk to you. Sounds like you're exactly our typical student. Yeah, and I'm reading the comments on the panelists as well as the live comments there. Yeah. So what I'd like to do is do this with a sample situation. Okay, so this is the type of stuff that I typically get. I need an app that does this. I'm like, okay, I will end up saying, okay, well, I need to know a little more about that. Can you tell me more about it? And then you might get this, not just one statement, but you might get 2 or 3 paragraphs, okay? And it might actually define those things, but that's what I'm looking for. I look through their information. Who's going to be using it? Are these people inside of your organization, or do you need your customers to use this app? It's the one thing that's I see as a limitation. There's some workarounds, but it's a little bit of a pain in the backside to get external users to use your app in your environment. You have to add them as guest users in your Active Directory, your Azure AD organization, as a guest user, so they can use that app. So there's more steps. involved in that. So I like to head off those problems there. And let's say as they're talking, they're telling me some things here, and they say, okay, I want to keep track of my customers. Okay. Typically, after I get the initial information, this is the defining of the information. I think I might actually sort of put this in here. Okay. I'll say the initial info, and we could have a whole session based on each of these steps. Okay.
You bet. So many of these steps could be a whole live stream, man.
Yeah. Information. That's what I meant to do there. And gathering requirements, you are going to be defining the entities or identifying. Okay. And I'm going to give you examples of entities in the CRM system. So customers, okay, you would define that as an entity. Okay. And they might say, well, I provide services. Okay. What are the services that you provide? Okay. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Okay. Well, I also need to communicate my customers. So I created a CRM system for the auto detailer, and he wanted to place a phone call directly from the app and call them on the phone that he's using. And I put in that feature. It's very easy to do that, or text them. And so all these different things. So let's just keep it simple and say, and as you talk to me, that's all that we need to do. Well, what I might try to do is say, hey, can we focus in on a minimal viable thing that you could start using right away? Well, yeah, I just need to keep track of my customers because right now they're just in my contacts on my phone. I need to get them out because when I bring up my contacts, my phone sort of freezes up for 10 seconds because I have thousands and thousands of contacts. And those aren't my friends and my family. Those are all my customers, So that could be something that could be a benefit, a value that you could give them by giving them that minimal viable product. Okay. So absolutely, Jeff, you need to sort of know the grand scope of where they're going, but then identify maybe in this, okay, this could be part of the minimal viable product, but they're like, me just having the customer data isn't going to be able to help me. Because right away, as soon as I start entering it, I need to communicate with them. So you might say, okay, well, that might be the minimal viable product. And so let's focus on that first. There's been a lot of times potential clients come to me and they start to talk and they start to give me details. And I start to take that in thinking that, okay, maybe I can get to the scope of this. And you spend a lot of time. If you focus on the MVP, you could say, I could create a customer, app has a customer out there, and they'll run you about $1,000, and it's going to include this, that, and the other. 1,000. I only had $150. Okay, well that you just saved yourself tons of time because you could have tried to define all these entities that they wanted to manage, and both of you realize that you're not a good fit, or maybe they actually need to learn PowerApps themselves. In that case, direct them to my channel here.
Right.
So what you're trying to do in the gathering the requirements, I'm going to take out that communicate, and we're going to say customers is the minimal viable product here, the MVP. Now I'm going to shift the screen here so I've got more, so you guys can see it a little better here. I'll try to zoom in. Okay, so for customers, and what are the different data points that the app needs to manage for your customers?
What's a data point? What's a data point?
So these are the pieces of information that you need to track for that entity. So here we have customers. Well, you probably need to keep track. And a lot of times they'll say, I need to keep track of their name. Well, you need to be seasoned enough to know that, you probably need to separate that out in a first name, last name. And no, I just need their name. No, you want to keep track of the first, last name, because at some point in the future, they're going to want to sort or search based on the last name. You don't want that in there grouped together.
Right.
So practicing database normalization, following normalization rules is something that we're delving in more in the accelerator program. And we've touched on in some of these Saturday live streams, but I won't be going into that so much here.
And for some of you new guys that are just getting started with this, that when we're talking about entities, that means your tables, that means your data structures. When we say data structures, that means those are those tables that you created out there in Dataverse or in SharePoint, and then you made these fields in there. You put fields in there. Those fields are the data points that he's talking about. You know, each field is a data point, and each data point is going to be a field in your table. So.
Absolutely. That's right on, Kurt. Not only do these entity names become a lot of times your database tables, but a lot of times you end up having a screen or two per entity, or you could have 5. It depends upon the workflow and everything, right? But also in other programming, I like to teach PowerApps in a way, guys, so that if in 5 years you want to go off and be a Python developer or a C# developer, a lot of these concepts are going to carry over and they're going to be timeless. Okay. So there are things that you might do in other platforms that might become your classes.
Yeah.
Okay. Not only, so these entities can be tables, you have screens attached to those entities. You can have, your classes, or sometimes they call objects. Now they're a little different, but sometimes people use those two terms interchangeably. Okay. So class is more like a blueprint. So you might have a customer object inside of your code. And whenever the program runs, it's instantiated and there's this customer object in memory. Well, that's the object. Okay. So it actually, these entities things will affect a lot of different things. Were you about to say something, Kurt?
You just blew away some of these guys when you said that. When you said blueprint and instantiation and right. That's and when he's talking about entities, he's also talking about the kind that are going to stay there. They're persistent. Persistent entities are the ones that are going to stay. They're going to be saved somewhere on your hard drive so that you can get them. Other entities are things like he said, the screens and your classes and your objects. They're going to be alive when your program's running, but then they're going to die as soon as your program goes away. So you got sustainable, persistent entities, and then you got the other kind. So when you hear these terms, that's all he's talking about. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you hear, whenever you've gotten the application definition, you met with them, you got a few paragraphs of information, hopefully of a few, quite a bit of information, and you've sort of pulled that out of them with some questions. As you go through that information, you're going to identify the nouns. Okay. And you identify nouns like, okay, my customer comes in and walks in front of our computer. Okay. Well, that's a noun too, a computer, a person, place, thing, or idea. Well, they're going to come in front of a computer. Well, you'd identify that as a noun and say, okay, well, does this application need to manage computer information? Oh, no, they just come in. I'm just telling you, they come and stand in front of this computer. Okay, then I won't include that entity. If your application needs to manage data or these data points, or the information about the entities, that's when it needs to be a part of your entity list. Okay. And so, yeah, these become database tables. These become fields or columns in your database. Okay. And for each of these, okay, what's the data type? Okay. The type is going to be string or characters. Okay. Or sometimes this is called a single line of text. Okay. And that would probably hold true for each of these things. Now, for notes, you might want to allow them to say multiple lines of text. Okay. But phone, email, single line of text. What about their date of birth? Okay. Well, that's going to be date. You probably won't capture the time that they took their first breath when they were born. You're probably just going to hold the date in there. Okay. And then their age could be calculated based on that. So there's different types of data. Okay. What about, are they a, we call it a customer that comes back, recurring business.
Repeat customer.
Yeah. Repeat customer. We might call that repeat customer. Okay, that could be the field name, the data point. Now, what do you think the data type for that would be, Jeff?
I'm not sure.
So we could put the word yes or no, but in
Like a
programming
checkbox
terms, what's
or
that?
a checkbox or a toggle.
There you go. And in the programming world, that's called a Boolean type of value. Yes, no, true, false, checked, unchecked, that
Right.
type of thing. So yeah,
Okay.
so we'll say true, false in there. And there might be sometimes you might want to treat this thing as a string based on what you're working with. There, um, I found with Dataverse, it doesn't. I really don't like how it handles Boolean values. It actually uses a choice column, um, but that's not really something I wanted to delve in here. But I thought I'd mention it. Um, okay, so that's pretty much what you want to do at this stage in this very um, beginning stage of gathering the requirements in this little MVP first stage, right? Okay. So we've got all this information. So we've defined our entities. In this case, it's just going to be customers. And these are the things that we want to keep track of our customers. Okay. And we'll keep services and communication with our customers for the later phase. Okay. Now, what about user stories? User stories are um, features, okay, that you define. Put that up there. Features, find features um, in small units. Okay? And these are typically a single statement, like a statement. And so there's three parts to a individual story. Okay. So as a business owner, I need to add, edit, delete, also view. Okay. Um, customers.
I love this
Your
part of
data.
it. This is part of that agile stuff. I love this. I seen this company. I saw this company that they said as how am I say as control desk Sally. They even gave the person a name. So they gave them the position and then they gave the person a name. And then within that story, I thought that was pretty cool, man. Because I don't know, there's something about that when they did that, it made that thing more alive for me. Like that position was more alive, you know. I really like this.
It is really good. And this is how, if you join um, a team in IT and they're a project and they're expecting you to, and they've got a project manager or a business analyst, they will expect you to manage your work based on these user stories. So this is
Yeah,
actually really important.
it
Almost
is.
every place that I've been for the past 15 years, they all use agile or scrum methodology, and they do all this stuff. And there's a
Yeah.
lot more to scrum and agile that I'm letting on here. It's go pick up a book on it, or
I,
do a Google search, and I
I
want to
can't wait
provide
to do a
more of that.
live stream. I
Yeah.
can't wait to do a live
Oh,
stream on it, Darren.
well, Kurt, we need to go over here to video ideas. Oh,
Yeah.
number one.
Yeah. I cannot wait to do that. I really want to do that. This is all new to me and I just love it. Everything I'm seeing about it just seems like it's so important, you know?
Yeah. Stand-ups. You've got things called backlogs. So this is your backlog of like, the features that you're eventually going to get to. If an idea comes up, okay, add it to the backlog. At least you know it's been captured. It's there. And then you've got all these other things that are defined. Well, you've also got some type of a board. Okay, you guys are familiar with a Kanban board. Microsoft Planner is an example of this. Trello is. So a lot of times Azure DevOps is used. There's another one called ServiceNow. You know, um, yeah. So there's all kinds of stuff we can go into here.
You bet.
So going down here. So there's three parts of the story. As a blank. Okay. So I'm gonna create one like this. As a Now, of course, this is Markdown. Okay, as a role, say role. Let's see if it allows me to do this here. As a role, I want to or need to do something. Okay. Do something.
So that's the workflow.
So that blank. Okay. So that I can. What's going to be accomplished? So that something can be done. Okay. There's usually a reason why. Okay. I haven't quite mastered Markdown, which is what this tool uses for everything. Markdown. So anyway, I'll get better at that as time goes on.
He just
so
picked it up
here,
today, by the way. He just picked up the tool this morning. So, you know, it's like, I'm just.
Yeah, this is a great note tool. It's called Obsidian. And if I get too excited about it, I might have to create some videos on it or something. Because I gotta, right? That's
Put it up there. Put it up there. There's your new idea. Yeah.
It's not really related to okay, what about tools that help that aren't related? Okay, so I'll put Obsidian.
Tools that help design.
Okay, what about there's a tool I use for wireframing, balsamic, I think is how it's spelled. Other tools. What about loading
IO? Oh yeah, loading IO.
And what about Mockaroo? So we should have a video where we talk about all these tools that we have learned from different people out there. That's the internet's so great, and you learn about all these other tools people are using. Like, oh yeah, I might take a look at that. You know, that's how I came across this Obsidian thing. Okay, so as a role, as a business owner, I need to add, edit, delete, view customer data, customer records, so that I don't have to use my phone contacts anymore. Okay, what do you think of that? But you can really break this down, and you might think, oh, well, that's it. That's just what they need to do. You know, use your phone contacts. You add, edit, remove, view stuff so you can like make a phone call to your friends and your family. But as a business owner, you need to be able to do this. Well, you could actually say you can add on this as a business owner. Okay, I need to search. Okay, maybe there's a lot of customer data. You need to be able to search this customer data so that I can find records quickly, efficiently, and contact them, say, hey, I'm on my way to go mow your lawn. Are you guys going to be there? Or is there anything on the lawn that maybe you want to move yourself before I mow your lawn, that type of thing. And
this is an important point, Darren, why earlier you made the distinguishment between knowing first name and last name. If you're in a hurry, you're on the run, you're trying to just reach this person, you remember, the guy's first name is Ed, can't remember in the moment what his last name is. So you just type in Ed in your search, and it'll go through to do the search.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you might be talking to him on the phone. Ed, who am I talking to? Ed. Yeah, I know. I talked to you 1,000 times. Yeah.
This auto detailer I wrote a CRM system for, he wanted to know not only the birthdays, they want all the information on the spouse, because he offers deals like, hey, you want me to do both of your cars, once a month, and I have different levels. You want me to wax? Do you want me to do this, all this stuff? And then they want to know the spouse's birthday. So he would text them on their birthday or a week before, like, hey, do you want to provide a birthday gift where I come over and completely do a deep cleaning? Wow. He spends all day on that car. Oh, I was trying to figure out a perfect birthday gift. Boom, he's making him. It's a
great salesman. Idea. What a great salesman that person is. I love it. It's all about people, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So in order to get this wrapped up by, hopefully in 30 minutes here, I have a hard stop at 12:30. I'm going to try to get through this. So let's just say this is the extent of the user stories, and that's it. Well, what about the workflows? Okay, Jeff, let's say you're going to start a lawn mowing business, and part of your workflow is I call customers within 24 hours ahead of time to confirm. Okay. So in order for that workflow to happen, for this application to enable, to take that into consideration, you need to be able to do that search, right? So you might tell me there's all kinds of other workflows. It's like, oh, whoa. We need to go back up to our user stories and add that. Okay. So that's the only one that I'm going to leave in there. Wireframing. You know what? We could use Balsamic. What's great about PowerApps, it's such a nice rad tool. You can drop controls off and almost create a little prototype or a wireframing type of thing.
When you say wireframing, what are you talking about there?
Let me see if I've got, I'm hoping I can be able to pull this up fairly quickly.
Because I know there's people that would want to know what that's about.
Yeah. It's a way of doing almost like a sketch of the application screens. Okay. And you almost want to create a sketch, something that doesn't really look like the app. Because if you use PowerApps and drop a button on there and put the text boxes and the galleries and hey, the screen's going to look like this, they get in the idea. Oh, wow, it's almost done. You don't want to give them that idea. You want to give them a sketch,
That's a good point. That's, that I never thought of that. That would have saved me a lot of heartache back in the day.
Yeah. They just get this idea that, and I did find the video here. So this is great stuff. Right. So this is the video here. And if you look at it, so if you do a search here, PowerApps new tab ticket screen. I think I actually have, no, that's not the right one. Or is it? I had it as the, gonna sort of go through here and try to find the screen where I used it. That thumbnail, if I could pull up that thumbnail easily. Maybe I'll just go to Balsam. Okay. And that was an ad. I clicked on that, they got me. Okay, they have got good examples of their stuff here. I'm trying to find it real quick for you guys. Learn the wireframe. So you create sketches of what the screen is going to look like. Do you see here, like this is a wireframe of YouTube. Do you see that? Like everything, like you're not adding color or anything, and you just drag and drop these things.
Literally just the wires, just the frame work, just the frame.
Exactly, almost exactly what it sounds like, right?
No color, no. Yeah, I like it. It's a good principle.
Okay, so here it is. And so
all H4, Darren, all H4.
All H4?
That's your hotkey for strike through, by the way.
Really?
Alt H4. That's according to my research.
Oh, that's not. Is that a joke?
No, it's literally. I just looked it up.
Well, don't do that right now, Kurt, because what Alt F4? Did you say H4 or F4?
H4. Now that's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No one hit Alt F. I think it's F4. That actually closes down the application. Sometimes people will say, "Hey, what's the shortcut for blah blah?" And you say Alt F4, and you hit it, and then so that would kick you out of the live stream.
That's great. Control Alt Delete. That's your shortcut for
the. Yeah. So okay. So I got a project here, and I'm expecting this thing here. Oh, so yeah. So I actually have paid for this, and And I should have had that ready. Should have had it ready for you guys so I could show you a good wireframe of that. Let's use PowerApps as the wireframe right now. Okay. Simple CRM wireframe. And what you could do, and let's say they want to use it on their phone. So we'll say the phone type of orientation there. And you might tell them, oh, so what you want is a listing of all of your customers, right? So you could put something like that here. Now, this is actually where not using a blank one is actually useful. So you use a vertical where it's got some little bit of sample data and it's got an image in there. So you see like a little image of, and if you don't have, it's sort of weird to go maybe to your customers, you're mowing their lawn or auto detailing and say, let me stop a picture of you. No, you take a picture of their lawn or their house so you can remember, oh, this is that car. This is the Maserati that they always want me to clean every day or whatever. Might help you as you're thinking about for repeat business. So okay, so you want to list a customer so we can have something that looks like that. You might want to have a text input here at the top where you search. So you take the text input out. You might say hint text, search, and then you might put a little icon here. Okay. Now, in a real situation, again, I would actually recommend using something like Balsamic, or there is a tool that is really popular out there. It almost seems like the de facto thing for creating apps. So it says start with a page design. You can actually give it a sketch that you give it with a napkin, and you upload that image. I actually have a whole video where I did this. So if you search on my channel, you'll find it here, like right there, an image or a Figma file. So there's a design application out there, or service called Figma. It's very popular. I haven't used it a lot, but it looks like to be like people that design UI, UX for applications. They like to use that. So you can actually upload that file. Okay. So you could use any of these tools to create this wireframe. And it's sort of good to show the users that, okay, so this is what I'm going to give you here, and that's what it's going to look like. So when you click on this, you'll be able to see those pieces of information and maybe edit it. Does that sound about what you need? And Jeff will tell me, yeah, that's exactly what I need. Okay.
Right.
So, yeah, so the larger the application scope, the more you need to define things. Okay. So I'm going to put in here Figma, or even just a hand drawn or a whiteboard. Okay, whiteboard sketch. Okay, so let's talk about the database design. Okay, the tool that I really like is this Draw SQL website. Okay,
Yeah.
so I know that we need customers. And you'll have some type of an ID, a unique identifier, or if you're using SharePoint, it will actually create something out there called ID. That will be an auto incrementing number that will serve as the ID. So we know we've got first name, and these are SQL Server types. So don't worry about the types right now. Okay, last name. Because in SQL Server, a string of text is actually varchar. So you could define it that way if you want. Boolean is going to be bit. A big int is going to be a whole number. Okay. So we'll need a phone. We'll need email. And remember notes. Was there anything else? We could always just go back here and look at it. Okay. Repeat customer and date of birth. I'm going to say bit there. And for the database, we just say DOB. A lot of times you're used to hearing that DOB, date of birth, or you can spell it birthday. Okay. So that's pretty much our data structure there. Okay. So what is next in our process? Okay. So we've done our wireframing. We've created our design. I like draw SQL. So I'm going to put in here SQL. I think it is URL is drawsql.app. Okay. I'll put that link in there for you guys. Okay. Now, if you actually use MS SQL Server, it actually has a diagramming tool in it. And what is amazing, let's say built in. Okay. As you add a column in your ERD diagram, it actually modifies the schema automatically whenever you hit save. Isn't that cool?
Nice. You know what, Darren? We should do a live stream on installing Microsoft SQL Server and using that.
I like that.
Let's do it.
I want to do
And
that
we
one
can
soon.
we can use that. We could use me as the guinea pig on installing it on my system.
Let's do that one soon, man.
And I would be the perfect guinea pig because I know zero things. Now I'm a database dude, but I know zero about SQL Server. So this would be cool.
And Ron said, I see him over here, said, good idea. Absolutely.
Ellie Carter says, I like using Visio and Whiteboard. I love Visio. You know, Visio goes way back, and I remember Visio when Visio was still a baby, and it's really come along a long ways. I love Visio.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. I was trying to do some ERD diagramming in it. I didn't like it as much as Draw SQL, but Visio, if you're a Microsoft shop, that is typically, if you look at all the templates here, there's all kinds of stuff that is IT related type of stuff. It's
if you're wanting to create flowcharts, I'm a flowchart kind of guy because I came back from that kind of school, you know, back in the days of COBOL and RPG, you know. What does that RPG stand for, Darren? RPG. Most people don't even know what that stands for.
I know what RPG is. I don't know what it stands for.
Randomly punched garbage. That's what it stands for. Randomly punched. But for flowcharts, Visio, you can't beat it.
I actually looked at a lot of these templates, and for some reason I didn't see this one. I might start using this in Visio for my ERD diagrams. This is great because you got the types there, and you got the keys. You need to define your keys, and you need to define your relationships.
That's very smooth.
I might actually like this better. So I'll work with that a little more before you know, using that in the future. But for right now, we'll just continue to use this one.
Maybe Ellie could come in as a guest and do a live stream with Visio on how to use Visio.
Yeah,
it's got all kinds of great ideas for live streams here.
Oh yeah. Okay, so going back here, I'm trying to get through this. Okay, so that was a video idea, and that's a good idea. I'm going to go back down here. I'm trying to get to this. All right,
Darren,
so
you're doing great.
Work items. What, as a developer, I now should have a good idea of what they need. Okay, and what I'm going to say here is, you know what? I'm going to go out and I'm going to ask PowerApps to generate it on my data because it's so simple. In this case, that would actually be a real work item, you know. Now I wouldn't want that for a bigger app, but for something simple like this, it does work. It does work. So whatever you work like, okay, well, first of all, what I need to do is, you know, what are you going to be doing down here? You're going to go in your PowerApps studio. Then what? Okay, you got a screen to create. Okay, yeah. So I need to go out and do that. Well, about creating your database. Okay, you need to create all your indexes, or we need to import data. Everything that's going to need to be done down here in the construction phase, you need to have a bullet list item by numbers. A lot of time, as I see this, is like you'll have bigger topics, like sometimes they're called epics. You know, epics are broken down by stories. Again, I'm using agile or Scrum methodology here. but you'll have all these different terms, and it's sort of like you drill down to the individual item that you can hand off as if it was like a little post-it note. Hey, go off and do this. Okay, that might take me a day to do, So, well, you do that, and you give another post-it note to another developer. Hey, you go off and do this user story. And maybe they're working on 2 different screens and 2 different files, so it's not that big of a deal. And they come back, oh, hey, that's done. And during the stand-ups, you guys are telling each other what you each are doing. Like, oh, I'm doing something similar to that. Can we get together later after the stand-up and go over that?
Yeah.
So you'll actually define all your work items here. Okay. You might define how you're going to be doing things. So a lot of times in large organizations, they're going to be like, we need technical documentation so we can submit this to a team of software architects. And they might question, why are you using the Power Platform for that? And they might think that it's the right platform for it. But the software architects, a lot of times, programmers, developers, we like our tools. So if all you got is hammer, everything looks like a nail of something that you're going to hit. Sometimes you need to be a little bit of an architect, a little bit of a business analyst, a project manager yourself, if those roles aren't there. But be prepared if you get a job at a large corporation in the corporate life, that you'll see some of these things pop up. So I don't want you guys to be blindsided by these other things that come up, Okay. So yeah, Ellie says she'd like to get into the SQL Server stuff. Yeah, Ellie, book a call with us. We want to talk to you.
That's right.
And yeah. So yeah, Data's King is talking about Copilot. Yeah, so I'll jump over there and we'll actually do that here in a moment. So yeah, technical documentation and general documentation. This is always good to get the sign off for the customer. Okay, so what I would do is if I'm writing an app for Jeff for his lawn mowing business, is I'll pull all the stuff together, all the wireframing, all of the designs and everything, and put that in there and submit and get sign off. And only then do I say I am ready to give a time cost estimate. And I really try to shy away if they say ballpark. Well, it seems like it's a small type of application. So small applications can be done in 1 to 4 weeks, sometimes 6 to 8 weeks, and be very broad. Okay, well, that could be 2 to 10 months. Well, that's really broad. Well, you haven't given me all the information yet, have you? So there's a little bit, sometimes you need to push back a little bit when they're saying, well, that's a really, thing. Well, you got to realize, you got to try to make them see the reason in it. It's like, okay, well, if you tell me you just need a building built, how much is that going to cost? Well, do you want a shed or a skyscraper? That's going to change things. Or even if like a big office building, okay, big office building, are we talking about multiple stories, or is it all just going to be 1 story? That could change things considerably. How many bathrooms are going to be needed? All that type of stuff. Okay. All right. So at that point, we could go through here. Sometimes these things need to be, sometimes people want to create their database before they jump into PowerApps Studio. And I think in my notes, I actually had that first. And I think, Kurt, you might agree with that. Before we jump in and start actually doing the work in PowerApps, would you agree that most of the time you might want to start creating the database first, the data source first?
Yes.
Do you feel passionately about that, or are you indifferent to that?
It is so passionate about that. You can't say anything more about it. I know some people like to use and I get it. Some people like to go in there and paint their form up a little bit first. I guess you would call it wireframe, but some people would use PowerApps to do that. The wireframing, which probably is not the thing to do. But and then that gives them it opens up their mind to what kind of data. You remember that a few weeks ago now, when we were talking about Jeff about how about his writing an app for his lawn mowing business, and we started off with just this little customer app. By the time we got done with the live stream, we had about 12 data tables, and they were all related, right? Because what happened is we started, as we started creating that, we started opening up our imagination, and our mind started going, cool, we need this, and ooh, we need that, and we need this separated. And that's, I kind of see it kind of working both ways a little bit, but I really believe it's all about data first. The data needs to be first. Data is king, somebody told me. I argue with them that Elvis is king. Everybody, Elvis is king. But data is king.
And MD, he's offered a lot of good comments here. Correct best practice, create the back end. And, with some of the later versions of later versions, the past few years you've seen, and this might going back 10 years, but data first has been the de facto standards with a lot of software developers going out there. They design and implement the data source first, and then they start to create the code. But then there came in this thing called code first, and they start to create all their classes. So they might have a customer class and has a first name property, a last name property, and then they would use a script, and then it would generate the whole database based on that. So there is some difference based on the different schools of thought out there in the software development. Kurt and I are probably a little more old school. We definitely like to make sure the data is set up, and of course you don't have code first. PowerApps is a low code, so you're not going to be starting code first there anyway. No. But I just sort of like to throw that out there and give you guys good timeless software development advice there.
So Ellie's got a question here. How do you determine small, medium, and complex Power App projects? Is it on the screens, or filters, or delegation, or connections? The answer to that question is real simple. Yes. Yeah. That's the answer. Yes.
And some of that comes over time as you worked on a few projects. If you're just working with 1 to 3 entities, it could be considered as small, unless there's a lot of processes and things. But typically, the more complexity the app has in there, even on a few tables, you'll find that your database diagram, your database design starts to sprawl. That's why I believe it's important to identify that MVP, even though you're learning about everything else. So if you're looking at, let's say, a medium-sized application, I would say between 6 to 20 tables, I would say medium. Anything over 20 tables, it's a little bit of, perspective, a little bit of speculation, and a matter of opinion. There's not some hard set rule,
right.
in that. But
right. Sometimes you might only have a half a dozen tables, but you might have 20 or 30 screens that are addressing those different tables too. You can go backwards and forwards on it. So there's so many different dynamics in that.
Right, we got a repeat customer, and we're going to make this a yes, no checkbox, a Boolean type of a value. And I'm just trying to get this a SharePoint data source defined for us so we can move on to the next step. And I don't think that we have date of birth yet, so I'm going to go in here and create that. And I don't like spaces in my column names. Especially SharePoint. I don't like them in Dataverse as well, but if you're going to be doing any type of model-driven development, you almost have to accept that. Yeah. So I'm just looking at the comments here. Hearing the requirements is giving you headaches. Highly likely it's complex. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so date of birth, I'm going to pick a date. I don't care about the time they were born. So, birth. And at that point, this is the database table, our SharePoint list here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up. I'm going to go back to the PowerApps home. And Data is King did mention you could use this Copilot feature. You have to use Dataverse. So if you are using Dataverse, go in here and say, I need to keep track of my customers. And it's going to give you some good suggestions and stuff, but you're locked in the Dataverse there. Is going to want to use that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to create a new app, and I'm going to say a SharePoint list. Okay. Now, each of these things that I'm doing, you notice here on, we're in the construction phase now, guys. Everything that we're doing in the construction phase between creating our database and what we're doing inside of PowerApps, that should have been listed in our definition of work items. Okay, so the project managers and the customers, the stakeholders are going to know, oh, so that task is done. So they see these little check marks going down. Okay, the progress is being made, and it's sort of important because you just go off to your little cubicle or your office for a few weeks and they don't hear back from you, they get nervous. You have to address that. You need to give them reassurances that progress is being made, and they get that assurance through getting all this stuff that you've prepared for them and say, hey, remember that list of things that I was going to do? Those first 3 things are done, and I'm now working on this one, So it's asking me, okay, where's the data at? I have a SharePoint connection here. And what I'm going to do, it looks like I created this in my Darren Neese site. So a lot of times whenever you're connecting to the SharePoint site that you want to, it's going to show up here to the top. If it's not, you need to paste in the URL there and it will bring it up. Okay. Oh, look, there's customer. Okay. I'm going to click connect. Now, this tool has been out there, and I sort of like it because it's been out there. It's tried and true. Been tried and true. The Copilot feature is something that's new. It's exciting. It works with Dataverse, but we demoed it, and there were a few things in there that were giving us problems, and they're working on it, fixing their own bugs, right? They've got their own software development lifecycle process going on with Copilot. So This is something that will look, it generated a 3-screen application for us. We have a browse screen, a detail screen. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and run here.
Just to digress just a little bit, because I know you're trying to get this closed up.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think a person could answer the whys and the hows and the whats and the wheres using something like ChatGPT?
Bro, don't be giving away my secrets, man. So I've talked about this, and I'm just giving you a hard time, Kurt. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I have ChatGPT has really helped me out gathering requirements, creating documentation. I know the right questions to ask it. So the prompts are really important. I touch on that. I did an interview with Shane Young not too long ago. Guys, if you go look for that, I published that, and I actually talk about how I do that. And then I've got one video on, if you do a search for ChatGPT and Darren Neese, it should come up, where it actually helped me build the app. But I actually use it a lot of times with gathering the requirements. So for example,
See, I knew this was good. This is what happens. I said, quick digression.
And I got 9 minutes here. So thanks, Kurt. But it's a good point. It's a good point.
It is.
We need a whole video idea.
We do.
Using ChatGPT for
told me
design, the design and planning phase, right?
Absolutely.
Somebody told you what?
So somebody came up with this. I thought it was, I wish I had come up with it, but because I said it, I made it profound. But somebody had told me that the big question is do you guys think that this AI, this artificial intelligence, this ChatGPT, or this Copilot, they're gonna remove our jobs? They're gonna get rid of our jobs? And the answer became quickly no. They're not ever going to get rid of our jobs. But what you will lose your job to is somebody who is leveraging ChatGPT. If you're not using ChatGPT, you're going to lose your job to somebody who is. That's critical right there, man.
And that's almost exactly what Shane said on that, because I brought that up because it's a common concern that once people learn a ChatGPT, that's one of the first questions. Like, what? Is it going to take my job? I'm going to say this is a good guy, but his lawn is overdue for some attention. Repeat customer, yes, no, date of birth.
You could
Which is
put some
past.
in there like lots of hills or extra trimming. You know, if you're making it about, you know, specific to the lawn thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, are you talking about like the notes? We could have all
Yeah.
kinds of different fields and all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah. So you could talk about, you know, like what are the features of the yard? What are some things that might take extra time or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So here we've got the app is done. I just entered my first record. Boom, here we go. I can edit it. So there's three screens. There's like a listing, a viewing, and an editing. And of course, there's little buttons here at the top. And if you don't know PowerApps very well, this is a good little app to generate for yourself and click on these different icons and buttons and see what it does. Oh, look, that's how you delete a record. You use remove. Oh, this thing right here, this is how you go to a new screen. So this is a really nice tool. Okay. So I would save it. Oh, look at this. Okay. So simple CRM example. Save early, save often is what I try to teach people. And yeah, so just keeping an eye on the comments and everything here. Um, so that's what it is, and it's there. So we did the we created the database, we created the app. Now it's time to test, get user feedback. You could put that out there, and Jeff, you might tell me like, dude, you really missed the mark here. I needed to do a lot more than that. But if I go back and said, no, these were the stories, you know, you could always go back, because if you didn't do those things, you'd almost look like, let's just say unprofessional. You look unprofessional, like you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
If you didn't do those beginning steps, you're like, Darren, what is this? What is this crap, man? I needed to do so much more. And
Right.
you said $1,000, I gave you $1,000, and it really, it's just that, you know. But if you had enumerated and gone through all this stuff, this first phase, you wouldn't look unprofessional, like it's your first rodeo. So what do you guys think of that? So
I
looking at
like
the
it. I
comments.
actually like that customer page better than what I'm building now.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
That's okay. You're still learning the process here,
Right.
Jeff.
Yeah.
That app that you're creating is just a tool for you to learn with right now.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've got two calls to action for you. Got some action step for you guys if you want to take some action. Number one, if you guys would like a bit of like a consultation and sort of like what we were talking about before about see if you're a good fit for the accelerator, go up to the link above and there's some information there. And the other thing I ask, if you got any value out of this,
you're getting anything helpful out of this, a comment or even a like really helps the channel, and lets people like you know this is good content. Much appreciated.
there we go.
For some reason, YouTube thinks you're going to like this video next. Let's see if they're right. Or you can select this playlist, which I've selected for you based on the content you're currently watching. Guys, gotta hurry, click one of them. Otherwise, YouTube's going to autoplay some other video.